"Sir, you need to leave. This is a private event for members and invited guests only." The country club manager's voice was a polished blade of dismissal, his hand outstretched not in welcome, but in command. He saw a black man in a polo shirt where an honored guest should be. He had no idea he was ordering a United States Army colonel off a premises hosting his own unit's fundraiser. And he certainly didn't expect the thunder of rotor blades that would answer his prejudice. That man was Colonel Marcus Thorne, commander of the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade. He was the guest of honor at a fundraiser for his own soldiers, hosted on a course built on land leased from his base. For the manager, this was about protecting an exclusive world where 3/4 of private clubs have no black members. For the colonel, it was the latest insult in a career where nearly 1/3 of black service members report discrimination. So he picked up his phone and asked a simple, devastating question. To understand that moment, you need to know two institutions: the exclusive Pinehurst Grove Country Club and the United States Army. One was built on tradition and exclusion, the other on discipline and chain of command. Their worlds collided on a Saturday afternoon. Pinehurst Grove was established in 1953, a verdant oasis for the city's old money. Its founding documents never mentioned race, but its membership rolls told the clear story. For decades, it operated like hundreds of other clubs, through silent nods, blackballs, and unspoken rules. By 2024, its 400 members included 3 black families, all admitted within the last 5 years under quiet pressure from corporate sponsors. The manager, Grant Hollister, saw himself not as a gatekeeper, but as a steward of an ambience. His job was to maintain a certain experience. That experience was disrupted when Colonel Marcus Thorne arrived. Thorne wasn't just any officer. He was a West Point graduate with 2 master's degrees and combat tour in Iraq and Afghanistan. He commanded the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade, 1,500 soldiers, and a fleet of Apache and Black Hawk helicopters. The brigade's annual charity golf classic was a major event, raising over $200,000 for soldier family programs. This year, Pinehurst Grove had eagerly won the contract to host it. The club's general manager saw dollar signs and community prestige. He did not, however, inform every department head that the guest of honor was a black man. So when Colonel Thorne, wearing a simple polo and slacks, walked through the grand portico ahead of his staff, Grant Hollister saw a protocol problem. He saw a man who didn't fit the visual profile of a member approaching an invitation-only area. Hollister's training kicked in: diffuse, redirect, protect the club's environment. He intercepted Thorne with a polite, firm smile. "Sir, may I help you? The member grill is through the main clubhouse." Thorne, expecting a welcome, was momentarily confused. "I'm here for the 10th Aviation fundraiser." Hollister's smile tightened. The fundraiser was on the East Course, a separate, cordoned-off area. This man was at the main club entrance. "I see. The event check-in is at the pro shop. It's about a half-mile down the drive. I can call a cart for you." His tone implied the colonel had made an innocent, lower-status error. But Thorne's aides were arriving, a major and a captain, both in casual attire. They gathered around their commander. Hollister's discomfort grew. A group of black men, even well-dressed ones, lingering at the main entrance could affect the ambience. His priorities shifted from assistance to removal. "Gentlemen, if you're not here to access member facilities, I'll have to ask you to proceed to the event area. You're blocking the entrance." The major stepped forward. "Manager, this is Colonel Thorne, the event's honoree. We're expected inside." Hollister's mind raced. He had no memo about a black colonel. This felt like a potential scam, a group trying to bluff their way in. He'd seen it before. His voice turned cool, official. "Regardless, this area is for members and their escorted guests only. I need to see your event credentials or I must ask you to leave the premises." The word "leave" hung in the air. For Thorne, it triggered a lifetime of microaggressions: being followed in stores, having his authority questioned, being told he was in the wrong place. But this was different. This was a formal function for his command. The insult wasn't just personal, it was institutional. He kept his voice calm, lethal. "Mr. Hollister, is it? Call your general manager, call him now." But Hollister was committed. Backing down now in front of other members now glancing over from the terrace would undermine his authority. He made his fateful decision. "Sir, you are now trespassing. I need you to leave or I will summon security." He gestured to a uniformed guard. It was this scene, the manager pointing, the guard approaching, his own officers stiffening beside him, that Colonel Thorne absorbed. He saw the unyielding facade of the old world, a world that still, in 2024, assumed a black man in casual clothes was out of place. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Hollister, then at the sprawling, manicured course where his soldiers were waiting. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He had a secure line to his brigade's tactical operations center. This was no longer about a personal slight. This was about a direct challenge to the dignity of the United States Army, to every soldier under his command, and to the historic legacy of men like Lieutenant Arthur Gregg, who 74 years earlier was barred from a whites-only officers' club. History was repeating, just with better landscaping. Thorne spoke 2 sentences into the phone. The first was an order. The second was a location. Then he waited. The response would not be a complaint to corporate. It would be a statement written in rotor wash and the rumble of heavy vehicles. Grant Hollister, confident he had resolved the situation, had no idea he had just started a war on the 18th fairway. The first thing they heard was the deep, thrumming pulse, like a giant heartbeat tearing the sky open. It wasn't the distant whine of a news helicopter. This was the low, shuddering bass note of military rotor blades, growing from a hum to a roar in seconds. On the terrace, gin and tonics trembled on tables. Golfers on the nearby fairway froze, peering up as the sleek, dark shapes of 2 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters cleared the tree line. They banked hard, their chin-mounted sensors seemingly staring down at the clubhouse. Grant Hollister's smug certainty evaporated. His mind, trained for wine vintages and dress codes, couldn't process the war machines hovering over his 9th green. The security guard's radio crackled to life with panicked voices from the gate. Multiple heavy vehicles approaching the main entrance. Army trucks. They're not stopping. Colonel Thorne hadn't moved. He stood with his arms at his sides, watching Hollister's face cycle through confusion, dawning horror, and finally, visceral fear. The phone call hadn't been to a supervisor. It had been to a battle captain. The message was clear. "You called me a trespasser on property my base leases to you. Let's clarify who has the authority here." Behind the Apache, 2 larger AH-60 Black Hawks descended toward the open practice range. Before they even touched down, ropes were flung from their sides. Soldiers in full combat gear began fast-roping down, hitting the manicured grass and establishing a perimeter with practiced, lethal efficiency. This was no ceremonial guard. This was a show of deliberate, overwhelming force. Inside the club, the fundraiser attendees, soldiers' families, local sponsors, junior officers rushed to the windows. A young lieutenant colonel, the event organizer, sprinted from the pro shop, his face ashen. He pushed through the growing crowd of stunned members and went straight to Colonel Thorne, snapping a sharp salute. "Sir, what's the situation?" Thorne returned the salute. "A security situation, Mike. The manager here has declared me a trespasser at my own unit's event. I've requested a security detail to ensure the event proceeds without further interruptions." The lieutenant colonel turned to Hollister, his military courtesy replaced by icy fury. "You did what? Do you have any idea who this is?" But the spectacle was already escaping the club's control. Every guest, every staff member had a phone. The video uploaded in real time. The helicopters, the repelling soldiers, the stone-faced black colonel confronting the pale, frozen manager. Hashtags like Pinehurst Grove and military discrimination started trending within minutes. The local news desk, monitoring police scanners for the unusual military movement, dispatched choppers of their own. The club's general manager, Richard Vance, arrived at a full run, his blazer flapping. He took in the scene, his terrified manager, the stone-faced colonel, the military cordon outside. His financial brain calculated the damage instantly, the lost contract, the lawsuits, the PR nightmare. Colonel Thorne, I am so terribly, profoundly sorry. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding. Mr. Hollister acted entirely without. Thorne cut him off. He acted on your club's culture, Mr. Vance. He saw a black man where he didn't think one belonged. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a policy. Vance sputtered, offering comped memberships lifetime privileges. But Thorne wasn't here for a free golf game. The power had irrevocably shifted. The arriving battalion commander, a full-bird colonel himself, marched up to Thorne and reported the perimeter secure. The message to the club's board, watching now from their panicked phone chains, was unmistakable. You are now inside a temporary military security zone, on your own property. And then came the real escalation. A staff sergeant approached with a tablet, showing a live feed from the base's public affairs office. The story had gone nuclear. Cable news banners flashed, Showdown AT Country Club. A clip of Hollister saying, "You need to leave," played on a loop next to Thorne's service photo. Social media dissected Hollister's entire employment history, finding a past complaint from a black wedding planner denied access years prior. The institutional gears began to turn. By 5 p.m., a statement from the Department of the Army landed, dry and devastating. We are aware of the incident and are conducting a command inquiry. The Army expects all establishments it engages with to treat all soldiers with dignity and respect. It was a bureaucratic kiss of death. Other military bases nationwide began quietly reviewing their contracts with private clubs. At 7 p.m., the club's board held an emergency conference call. The old money patriarchs wanted to blame Hollister, fire him, and issue a vague apology. The younger, corporate-backed members saw the stock price of several member-owned companies beginning to tick down. They demanded a stronger response. The vote was split. They decided to wait to see if the story would blow over. It was their second catastrophic mistake. Because at 8 p.m., a different video surfaced. It was from a doorbell camera at the colonel's off-base housing community, dated 3 months earlier. It showed a private security patrol car, emblazoned with a logo linked to a company owned by a Pinehurst Grove board member, stopping Thorne as he jogged. The guard questioned him about suspicious activity before Thorne presented his military ID. The clip was short, but the connection was explosive. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, facilitated by a network of affiliated businesses that saw black residents, even a colonel, as inherent threats. The story morphed from a viral moment into a systemic scandal. Civil rights attorneys, smelling blood in the water, began gathering signatures for a class-action discrimination suit against the club's membership practices. A state senator, up for re-election, announced plans to subpoena the club's membership records, citing a decades-old state law about discriminatory practices in large, meal-serving private clubs. Grant Hollister, barricaded in his office, watched his life unravel on multiple screens. His professional reputation was ash. His personal social media was flooded with hate. But his lawyer, hired by the club's insurance, gave him one piece of advice. Do not resign. If you are fired, you have a wrongful termination case. You were enforcing club policy. The club made you the face of their culture, and now they have to own it. So Hollister dug in. And the club's board, facing legal liability from every direction, made their third mistake. They authorized their lawyers to send a letter to Colonel Thorne's command. Not an apology, a legally worded complaint about the disproportionate and disruptive military response, and a demand for financial restitution for damage to the Greens from the helicopter landings. They were going to fight the United States Army. The letter arrived at the brigade headquarters at 0800 hours the next morning. When Colonel Thorne read it, he didn't get angry. He smiled. They had just moved the conflict from the realm of social media outrage to the realm of lawful military protocol. He picked up the phone again. This time, he didn't call the aviation battalion. He called the office of the Judge Advocate General. And he called a reporter from the Washington Post who had been digging into military discrimination cases. The club had chosen a battle of documents and investigations. They had no idea what was in Colonel Thorne's file. The file Colonel Thorne gave to the JAG lawyer wasn't about the country club. It was about the base itself. For 18 months, he had been quietly documenting every racial incident within his command. Slurs painted on a black sergeant's locker, a noose left in a motor pool, the disproportionate punishment of minority enlisted soldiers. He had filed reports up the chain, only to see them vanish into the bureaucracy, marked resolved or unsubstantiated. The Pinehurst Grove incident was the public spark, but Thorne was now using it to ignite a long-overdue internal purge. The Judge Advocate General's office moved with startling speed. The club's demand for restitution was not just rejected, it was entered into evidence as Exhibit A of bad faith. More importantly, the JAG investigators subpoenaed the club's full membership and employment records. They weren't just looking at Grant Hollister, they were mapping a network. The Washington Post reporter, Sarah Chen, published her story 2 days later. It didn't just recount the helicopter showdown. It revealed that the land lease between Fort Carson and Pinehurst Grove, signed in 1998, was up for renewal in 6 months. The annual fee was $1. The article asked a simple, devastating question. Why was a multi-million-dollar private club leasing federal land for virtually nothing? The answer, buried in old county commission minutes, was a community partnership for shared security and emergency response. In practice, it meant the club's wealthy members had exclusive access to base amenities like the hospital's executive wing, while the base used the club's courses for morale events. It was a cozy, opaque symbiosis between military leadership and local elite. Colonel Thorne, new to the command, had been questioning the lease's terms for months. The club's board knew he was a problem. Grant Hollister just didn't know he was the man they'd been complaining about. Now the story had 3 explosive threads: discrimination, a suspicious federal land deal, and a military cover-up of racial hostility. Congressional staffers on the Armed Services and Oversight Committees took notice. Letters were drafted. Inside Pinehurst Grove, the board fractured publicly. 3 younger members, including the CEO of a tech firm, resigned in protest, issuing statements condemning the club's archaic culture. Their departure triggered a financial clause, forcing the club to buy back their shares at a premium, creating a massive cash crunch. The club's longtime president, a retired banking magnate named Arthur Pembroke, dug in. He went on a local radio show, his voice trembling with aristocratic indignation. This is a witch hunt against a private institution. That officer orchestrated a military assault on a civilian property because his feelings were hurt. Since when does the Army deploy attack helicopters over a misunderstanding? The statement was a gift to Thorne's allies. Army Public Affairs, which had been neutral, released a new fact sheet. It listed the 13 documented times military police had been called to the club over the past 5 years to remove intoxicated members who had wandered onto base property. The shared security agreement was a one-way street. The club relied on soldiers to handle its problems, but refused to host them with dignity. Then came the whistleblower. A former club concierge, a black woman named Maya, contacted Sarah Chen. She provided internal emails from 2022. In them, the events director discussed the upcoming brigade fundraiser, writing, "The unit commander is a call Thorne Black. Ensure staff is prepped that he will have full access. Do not want a repeat of the Vance wedding incident." The Vance incident referred to a previous situation where a black guest at a wedding was repeatedly questioned by staff. The club's leadership knew their staff had a bias problem. They tried to manage around it for a lucrative contract, but didn't bother to fix it. The club's legal strategy collapsed. Their insurance company informed them coverage for discrimination lawsuits was void if the club knew about the problem and failed to act. They were on the hook for everything. But the real earthquake was still to come. As part of the JAG investigation, soldiers in Thorne's brigade were given an anonymous survey. The results, leaked to NBC News, were catastrophic for the Army's public image. They matched the Defense Department's own suppressed data. 31% of black service members at the base reported experiencing racial discrimination. 70% believed complaints weren't taken seriously. The report didn't just implicate the country club. It painted a picture of a base where the country club's attitude was merely a reflection of a deeper, tolerated sickness. The Pentagon could no longer treat this as a local PR issue. The Secretary of the Army announced a full, independent review of racial climate at Fort Carson and all installations with similar community partnerships with private clubs. In a stunning move, they suspended the land lease with Pinehurst Grove immediately, citing a breach of goodwill. Overnight, the club lost its coveted, nearly free land. Its valuation plummeted. Members faced massive special assessments to cover the legal battles and the potential loss of their property. The genteel world of quiet exclusion was now a loud, public financial disaster. Grant Hollister, isolated and blamed by everyone, was finally fired. But the termination letter stated it was for gross insubordination for speaking to the media, not for discrimination. It was the board's last, petty attempt to deny the core truth. Hollister's wrongful termination suit was now guaranteed. And in a quiet office, Colonel Thorne met with the JAG lead investigator. The investigator slid a photo across the table. It was from a base yearbook in 1975. It showed a young, black private standing outside the then-Whites' only NCO club at Fort Carson. The private was Isaiah Thorne, the colonel's father. He had been turned away from that club 50 years ago. Marcus Thorne had known the history of the land he commanded. His final, unspoken question to the country club had been generations in the making. The battle over a Saturday afternoon fundraiser was about to rewrite history for both a family and a nation. The congressional hearing was not held in a grand chamber, but in a modest conference room at Fort Carson. The symbolism was deliberate. The power was coming to the source of the problem. Staff members for the House Armed Services Committee sat across from Colonel Thorne, Arthur Pembroke of the Country Club, the base commanding general, and Grant Hollister, who now looked like a man attending his own funeral. The questioning was methodical and brutal. They started with the land lease. Pembroke, under oath, struggled to justify the $1 annual fee. He spoke of historic partnerships and community support. The committee's lead counsel, a sharp-eyed woman, interrupted him. Mr. Pembroke, in the last fiscal year, Pinehurst Grove reported gross revenue of $18 million. Your club leased 47 acres of federal land for less than the price of a soda. Do you believe that is an equitable deal for the American taxpayer? Pembroke had no answer. The council then entered into evidence the internal emails about prepping staff for Colonel Thorne's race. The club's culture, once protected by whispers, was now being read aloud into a federal record. Hollister was asked to explain his trespassing accusation. His legal counsel objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. His own words from that day, captured on multiple phones, played in the quiet room. You need to leave. This is a private event for members and invited guests only. Then it was Colonel Thorne's turn. He didn't speak about his feelings. He presented data. He showed the survey results from his brigade. He detailed the 13 MP calls to the club. He connected the club's exclusionary atmosphere to the tolerance for racism within his own command, arguing they were two symptoms of the same disease, the belief that some spaces simply aren't for black people, whether it's a golf course or a military career field. The most powerful moment came when he was asked about his father's photo. He confirmed it quietly. Private First Class Isaiah Thorne was told he didn't belong in his own Army's club in 1975. In 2024, his son, a full colonel, was told he didn't belong in a club built on Army land. The venue changed. The message did not. The hearing's conclusions were released 2 weeks later. They were a total repudiation of the club. The committee recommended the land lease be permanently terminated, and the club charged fair market value for its years of occupation, a sum estimated at over $2 million. They further recommended the Department of Defense audit all similar agreements with private clubs nationwide. The club's world crumbled under the weight of the financial penalty. Facing bankruptcy, the board had no choice. They accepted a takeover offer from a consortium led by a minority-owned investment firm. The sale had one non-negotiable condition: the complete dismantling of the old membership structure. 6 months after the helicopters landed, Pinehurst Grove Country Club reopened as the Grove at Carson Fields. Its new membership charter had explicit diversity quotas and a community access program. The portrait of the old founder was replaced by a simple plaque acknowledging the site's complex history. The first honorary member was Isaiah Thorne, who attended the reopening with his son. Within the Army, the fallout was just as profound. The independent review resulted in the forced retirement of 2 senior officers at Fort Carson for fostering a permissive climate for discrimination. The Army implemented a new policy: any private establishment found to engage in discriminatory practices would be immediately barred from all contractual relationships with the Department of Defense. Colonel Thorne was promoted to Brigadier General and assigned to the Pentagon's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, tasked with reforming the very systems he had exposed. Grant Hollister's wrongful termination suit was settled out of court for a modest sum, with a strict non-disclosure agreement. He left the state and reportedly works in hospitality management at a resort with no membership model. The club's old guard, including Arthur Pembroke, resigned their memberships rather than join the new integrated club. But the story's final, surprising detail emerged from the financial audit. When investigators dug into the club's books to calculate the back rent owed to the government, they found a series of irregular payments labeled landscape consulting. These payments, totaling over $400,000, were traced to a company owned by a now-retired base general who had signed the original lease agreement. The $1 lease wasn't just about camaraderie. It had been quietly greased with personal kickbacks. The scandal had reached back into the past, exposing a corruption that benefited both the white elites of the club and the white generals on the base, at the expense of both soldiers and taxpayers. In the end, Colonel, now General, Thorne's stand accomplished what decades of quiet complaints had not. It shattered a corrupt symbiosis between wealth and military power. It proved that the most exclusive gates could be opened not just by asking politely, but by the unwavering conviction of those told they don't belong and the formidable resources they command. The helicopters over the 18th fairway weren't just a spectacle. They were the sound of a wall coming down. The story of Pinehurst Grove is a blueprint. It shows how systems of exclusion are maintained not just by overt racists, but by polite managers, by complacent boards, by cozy financial agreements, and by the silent assumption that some spaces are not for everyone. That system survived for decades because the cost of challenging it seemed too high, and the power arrayed behind it seemed too great. General Thorne's victory wasn't just about integrating a golf course. It was about proving that these systems have vulnerabilities. They rely on the marginalized person walking away. They cannot withstand someone who not only stands their ground, but brings the full weight of truth, evidence, and institutional authority to bear against them. The real weapon wasn't the helicopters. It was the lease agreement, the survey data, the buried emails, and the unbroken line of history from a father barred from a club to a son commanding the land it sat on. This pattern repeats everywhere, from the Shoal Creek controversy that forced the PGA to change, to the ongoing struggle of black service members like the late Lieutenant Arthur Gregg, whose name now replaces a Confederate's on a club he was once banned from. The battle is never just about one moment of humiliation. It's about uncovering the architecture of advantage that moment protects. So the lingering question isn't whether there are other Pinehurst Groves. We know there are. The question is what or who will be the catalyst for their reckoning. Will it take another military stand, or can we, as a society, learn to recognize and dismantle these exclusive systems before they require a spectacle to break them? The walls around the world's most exclusive spaces are often invisible, built on tradition and whispered rules. But as one colonel proved, they are not unbreachable. They are waiting for the right person with the right key to decide that enough is enough. If you found this deep dive into power, prejudice, and accountability compelling, make sure to subscribe. We uncover these hidden stories every week. Thanks for watching.